Is immortality truly a gift when it strips away everything that made you human? In the grim darkness of the far future, there exists a fate worse than death. A transformation so absolute, so irreversible, that even the mightiest warriors who sought it have come to curse the very moment they ascended beyond mortality. They are the Daemon Princes, beings of unimaginable power who traded their souls for godhood, only to discover that the price was everything they once were. Picture a champion standing at the precipice of apotheosis. Around him, reality itself begins to fracture. The air thickens with impossible colors that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. His patron god whispers promises of eternal glory, of power beyond comprehension, of a place among the divine. In that moment, as warp energy courses through his veins and his flesh begins its final transformation, he believes he has won. He believes he has transcended the weakness of mortality, escaped the tyranny of time itself. He is wrong. The transformation is ecstasy and agony combined into a single eternal instant. Bones crack and reform into new configurations. Skin splits to accommodate appendages never meant to exist in the material realm. Wings erupt from shoulder blades. Horns crown a skull that stretches and warps into something that was once a face, but can never be called human again. And with each physical change, something deeper shifts. Memories begin to blur at the edges. Emotions that once drove him, loves and hatreds carved into his soul through decades of life, start to feel distant, as if they belong to someone else entirely. Because they did belong to someone else. The man he was is dying even as the demon is born. Among the countless Daemon Princes scattered across the galaxy and within the warp itself, there are those who carry a secret shame. In the rare moments when the gifts of their patron god allow them clarity, when the madness recedes like a tide revealing the wreckage beneath, they remember. They remember why they fought. They remember the oaths they swore. They remember the faces of brothers who stood beside them before everything changed. And in those moments, something terrible awakens within them. Something that their god never intended them to feel. Regret. Consider Mainkar the Reborn, once a word-bearer who walked in the shadow of Logar himself. He orchestrated the corruption of entire chapters, toppled planetary governments, and spread the word of chaos across 1,000 worlds. His reward was transformation into a Daemon Prince of Chaos Undivided, a fusion of all four gods' gifts into a single terrible form. For millennia, he reveled in his power, leading armies that made star systems burn. But Maer possessed something unusual among his kind. He retained more of his original consciousness than most, more of the calculating mind that had made him valuable in the first place. And with that consciousness came something unexpected. There were battles where, in the heat of combat against the Imperium he once served, he would pause. Just for a fraction of a second. Just long enough to recognize that the devotion in the eyes of the Space Marines facing him was the same devotion he once felt. The same faith that had driven him before the pilgrimage to Cadia, before Logar showed him the truth. In those microseconds, he wondered if truth was the right word after all. The warp does not forgive such thoughts. Each moment of doubt, each flicker of the man he used to be, brought punishment. His form would shift involuntarily. His powers would rebel against his will, and the whispers of the gods would grow louder, drowning out the last remnants of Mainkar's original self. Daemonhood is not a reward that can be returned. It is a collar that tightens with every breath, a chain that grows heavier the more you struggle against it. Then there are those who ascended seeking something specific, only to find it forever beyond their reach. Daemon Princes who were once devoted fathers, watching their children age and die across the centuries while they remain locked in immortal stasis. Champions who loved another, only to discover that love itself is an emotion that dims and warps in the presence of demonic essence, until what remains is a hollow echo that torments rather than fulfills. Warriors who fought for honor and glory, now realizing that true honor cannot exist when you are a pawn in games, played by beings who view morality itself as a cosmic joke. The greatest irony is that they cannot die. True death is impossible for a demon prince. Even when banished, even when their form is destroyed in the material realm, they simply return to the warp to reform, to endure, to continue existing in service to powers that never asked what they wanted, only what they were willing to give. And they gave everything. There is a tale, whispered among the fallen, of a demon prince who tried to undo his ascension. No names survive in the telling, perhaps because names themselves become fluid things in the warp, or perhaps because those who knew them chose to forget. This prince, it is said, sought out forbidden rituals and ancient lore that predated even the age of strife. He delved into the darkest corners of reality, bargaining with entities even other demons feared, searching for a way to reverse the irreversible. What he found instead was the truth. A truth that shattered whatever remained of his sanity. The truth was simple, brutal, and absolute. There is no undoing apotheosis because there is no self left to restore. The process of ascending to daemonhood doesn't transform who you are. It consumes who you were entirely, replacing it with something new that merely carries the memories of the original like scars on borrowed skin. The man doesn't become a demon. The man dies, and a demon is born wearing his face, speaking with his voice, believing it is him. Every demon prince is a ghost puppeting its own corpse, convinced it survived the transformation when in reality, it died the moment Ascension began. This nameless prince, upon comprehending this reality, did something no demon prince had done before or since. He screamed, not a roar of rage or a howl of battle lust, but a scream of pure, existential horror that rippled through the warp itself. It lasted for what mortals would measure as 17 years. And when it finally ended, he simply stopped. Stopped moving, stopped thinking, stopped being anything more than a statue of crystallized warp energy, frozen in the moment of his revelation. Some say he still exists in that state, somewhere in the deepest reaches of the immaterium, a monument to the cost of ambition. But his story is an extreme. Most demon princes never reach such clarity. They exist in a state between awareness and oblivion, where the regret comes in fragments, in dreams they didn't know they could still have, in momentary flashes when facing an enemy who reminds them of someone they once loved. The tragedy is that these moments are brief. The demonic essence reasserts itself quickly, washing away doubt with renewed purpose, burying regret beneath layers of divine imperative and the intoxication of power. It's a cycle of remembering and forgetting, of brief humanity followed by long stretches of inhumanity. Consider the tale of Periclitor the Foresworn, a demon prince of Tzeentch. Before his transformation, he was a navigator named Calvius, one of the greatest of his house, who could see paths through the warp that others considered impossible. His mutation, the third eye that marked all navigators, was more refined than most, allowing him glimpses not just of safe passage but of potential futures. It was this gift that became his curse. He saw too much. He saw the stagnation of the Imperium, the slow death of humanity beneath the weight of its own dogma. He saw billions suffering under a regime that had forgotten why it fought. And in his arrogance he believed he could see a better way. Tzeentch showed him that better way. Or rather, showed him 1,000 better ways, each more glorious than the last, each promising hope for humanity's future. All Calvius had to do was serve. All he had to do was help orchestrate certain events, manipulate certain variables, guide certain ships to certain dooms, small sacrifices for the greater good. He told himself this as he led a dozen vessels carrying refugees into warp storms. He told himself this as his visions guided raiders to orphan worlds. He told himself this as everything he had sworn to protect crumbled around him. His reward came during the fall of his own house. As his relatives died around him, as the navigational spire that had guided his family for 10,000 years collapsed into rubble, Tzeentch granted him ascension. His body erupted with eyes, hundreds of them, each seeing different timelines, different possibilities, all the futures he could shape with his new power. He had become change incarnate, the very embodiment of Tzeentch's grand design. For 3 centuries, Periclitor rejoiced in his transformation. He wove plots within plots, corrupted entire sectors, and watched futures unfold exactly as he had foreseen. Until one day, all of his eyes simultaneously focused on a single timeline. A single possibility. In it, he saw what would have happened if he had never accepted Tzeentch's offer. He saw Calvius the Navigator living a simple life, guiding merchant vessels through safe routes, eventually retiring to teach young navigators the traditional paths. He saw him dying in his bed, surrounded by grandchildren who bore his mutation and carried his legacy forward. It was a small life, an insignificant life by the standards of cosmic horror and galactic war. It was the life he wanted. The vision lasted only a moment, but in that moment, every single eye on Periclitor's body wept. Not all at once, but in a cascade, like a wave of grief rolling across his flesh. He tried to stop it, tried to reassert control, but the eyes kept weeping. They wept for days. They wept until entire planets in the warp felt the rain of a demon's tears. And Tzeentch, ever the master of cruel irony, let him feel it fully. Let him understand completely what he had traded. Then, just as abruptly, the feeling vanished, the eyes dried. The sorrow evaporated like morning dew. Periclitor returned to his schemes, his plots, his careful manipulation of fate's threads. But now he did so with the knowledge that somewhere within him, buried beneath layers of demonic essence and divine purpose, something was screaming. Something would always be screaming. Not all regret is so philosophical. Some demon princes mourn simpler losses. There was once a world eater, elevated to daemonhood by Khorne himself, who remembered music. In life, he had been a librarian before the butcher's nails were implanted, before Angron turned his legion into bloodthirsty berserkers. He remembered playing a Nostraman's string instrument, remembered the way notes could flow together to create something that made people stop and listen. After his ascension, after he had been transformed into a towering creature of brass and blood, after he had torn apart armies with his bare hands, he found himself standing in the ruins of a cathedral. The floor was slick with the blood of the faithful he had just slaughtered. And from somewhere in the rubble, a damaged Vox system was playing a hymn. It was poorly recorded, the audio distorted and warped. The hymn itself was simple, something children sang in the lower hives. But for just a moment, the Daemon Prince stood still. His claws, still dripping with viscera, hovered in the air. Something in him recognized the patterns, the way the melody rose and fell, the structure of the composition. He wanted to remember the instrument he used to play. He wanted to remember what it felt like to create something instead of destroy. But Khorne does not permit such thoughts. The nails, even in their demonic form, bit deeper. The rage surged back. Within seconds, he was tearing through the rubble, crushing the Vox system, ensuring that no music would ever play in that place again. And yet, for centuries afterward, in the brief moments between battles, he would find himself trying to remember, trying to hear that melody again in his mind. But the memory was gone, shredded by the same transformation that had given him power. All that remained was the knowledge that he had lost something irreplaceable, something he couldn't even properly recall anymore. This is perhaps the deepest layer of regret among the fallen. Not just mourning what they lost, but losing even the ability to remember what it felt like to be what they were. Imagine reaching for a memory and finding nothing but void. Imagine knowing you once loved someone but being unable to recall their face, their voice, or why they mattered. The emotion remains like a phantom limb, aching in absence, reminding you constantly that something was severed that can never be reattached. And still, despite all of this, despite the regret and the anguish and the endless torment of half-remembered humanity, they serve. They cannot help but serve. The Daemon Prince bound to Nurgle continues to spread plague, even as he mourns the garden he once tended in life. The Daemon Prince sworn to Slaanesh pursues ever greater excess, even as she remembers, dimly, that satisfaction was once possible, That desire could be fulfilled rather than eternally chased. They are prisoners of their own ascension, trapped in forms that will never die, serving purposes they no longer fully believe in, if they ever did. There is no rebellion among the regretful, no uprising of self-aware demon princes seeking redemption, because redemption requires a self to redeem, and the self is precisely what they sacrificed. What remains are echoes, fragments, ghosts of who they were operating within the framework of what they became. They can regret, but they cannot change. They can remember, but they cannot return. In the darkness of the warp, where time has no meaning and space folds upon itself, these princes sometimes find each other. Not physically, for their patrons would never allow such gatherings, but in dreams, in moments when the madness recedes enough for something like communication. They share their stories without words, exchange their regrets without language. And in these brief, impossible meetings, they ask each other the question that haunts them all. Was there ever a choice? Did they walk willingly into damnation? Or were they manipulated from the moment they first heard the whispers? This question has no comfortable answer, because the truth shifts depending on which damned soul you ask, and the chaos gods themselves delight in the ambiguity. Free will and predestination dance together in the warp like lovers, locked in an eternal embrace, neither able to exist without the other, neither willing to release their grip. Take the case of Voldorius, the demon prince who once served as captain of the Fire Drakes, a salamander successor chapter known for their compassion and their dedication to protecting human life. His fall was not sudden. It was glacial, a corruption so gradual that by the time he realized what was happening, there was no path back to the light. It began with dreams. Just dreams. Visions of forge fires that burned with colors he had never seen, that produced metals stronger than anything the Imperium could manufacture. As a tech marine, he dismissed them as the product of an overactive mind stressed by constant warfare. But the dreams persisted, growing more detailed, more seductive. He started experimenting. Small modifications to his armor at first, minor improvements to his weapons. The changes worked better than they should have. His brothers praised his innovations. His chapter master commended his dedication to the craft. Nobody noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor, the way his eyes lingered too long on the forge fires, the way his prayers to the Emperor became rote, mechanical, empty of the devotion they once carried. By the time he realized the dreams came from Tzeentch, by the time he understood that every improvement, every innovation, every success was bait drawing him deeper into a trap, he had already taught his methods to his brothers, had already spread the corruption without knowing he was corrupted. The moment of his ascension came during a battle against an orc wug that threatened to consume an agri-world housing billions. Voldorius fought with the fury his chapter was known for, but in the chaos of combat, he saw an opportunity. A way to save more lives by channeling warp energy through a device of his own creation, turning it into a weapon that could obliterate the orc leadership in a single strike. He told himself it was necessary, told himself that the Emperor would understand, told himself that saving billions justified the risk of using Forbidden's power. The device worked. The orc wug collapsed. The planet was saved. And Voldorius's soul was shredded in the process, his body transformed into something that made his brothers raise their weapons against him, even as he insisted he was still their captain, still their brother, still loyal to everything they believed in. He killed 17 of them before he fled into the warp, and with every death, he felt his humanity slipping further away, felt the demon taking firmer control. By the time he stopped running, there was nothing left of the compassionate warrior who had once carried children from burning buildings. There was only Voldorius, Daemon Prince of Tzeentch, architect of his own damnation, forever asking himself if the first dream had been his, or if it had been planted there, waiting for the right moment to take root. The answer matters less than the fact that he'll never know for certain. This uncertainty is its own form of torture, a question that circles endlessly in whatever remains of his consciousness. If he chose this path, then he bears full responsibility for everything he became. If he was manipulated from the beginning, then his entire existence is a cosmic joke, his will nothing more than an illusion. Either answer is unbearable. Both might be true simultaneously. But there are others whose choice was far more explicit, whose regret stems not from manipulation, but from the dawning realization that they understood the price and paid it anyway, only to discover the price keeps rising. Daemon princes who accepted Ascension with full knowledge of what it meant, who looked at their humanity and decided it was worth trading for power, for revenge, for the chance to strike back at an imperium that had wronged them. Their regret is perhaps the purest, untainted by questions of free will or manipulation. They made a deal with open eyes, and now they live with the consequences. There was a fallen inquisitor named Golesh who became a demon prince of Nurgle under precisely such circumstances. She had spent centuries fighting the enemies of mankind, had sacrificed everything for the Imperium's survival. Her family, her health, her sanity, all offered up on the altar of duty. And when she finally discovered the truth, when she uncovered evidence that the High Lords themselves were engaged in the very heresy she had spent her life fighting against, when she brought her findings forward and was branded a traitor for her honesty, she made a choice. A clear, conscious, deliberate choice. She chose to burn it all down. Chose to embrace Nurgle and transform into something that could never be silenced, never be disappeared, never be erased by the bureaucracy that had betrayed her. For a time she reveled in it, watched imperial worlds rot from within, saw corrupt officials die screaming as plagues liquefied their organs, felt a grim satisfaction as the system that had cast her out suffered for its sins. But satisfaction is not the same as purpose, and eventually, the satisfaction faded. She found herself standing in the ruins of a Medicaid facility on a world she had condemned, watching children die from the very plague she had unleashed. Children who had nothing to do with the High Lord's corruption. Children whose only crime was being born in the wrong place at the wrong time. In that moment, Golesh understood what she had become. Not a revolutionary, not a force for justice, just another monster, another bringer of suffering, perpetuating the very cycle of cruelty she had sworn to end. The worst part was that she couldn't stop. Her nature as a demon prince of Nurgle compelled her to spread disease. Her existence itself was plague. Even if she stood perfectly still, her presence would rot the air, sicken the ground, turn everything around her into a festering wasteland. She had become the thing she hated, and there was no cure for what she was. She still serves Nurgle, still spreads his gifts across the galaxy, but she does so with the full knowledge of what she's doing, with complete awareness of the suffering she causes. And that awareness never dims, never fades, never grants her the mercy of ignorance. Some might argue this makes her worse than the demon princes who were manipulated, who can claim they didn't know what they were choosing. Golesh knew, knows, will always know. This raises an uncomfortable question that most scholars of chaos refuse to address. Are the regretful Daemon princes somehow more dangerous because of their regret? Does their suffering make them more effective servants of the dark gods, precisely because they understand what they're doing? There's a theory, whispered among certain radical inquisitors who have delved too deep into forbidden lore, that the chaos gods don't just tolerate regret among their princes, they cultivate it, feed it, nurture it like a farmer tending crops. Think about it. A demon prince who has lost all connection to their humanity, who feels nothing but the base drives of their patron god, is powerful but ultimately predictable. They charge when Khorne demands blood. They scheme when Tzeentch demands plots. They indulge when Slaanesh demands excess. They corrupt when Nurgle demands decay. But a demon prince who remembers what they were, who understands the weight of what they're doing, who carries genuine regret for their actions, that prince fights harder, trying to prove their sacrifice meant something. Plans more carefully, desperately seeking validation that their choice was justified. Pursues greater extremes, hoping that somewhere in the excess they'll find what they lost. Spreads corruption with methodical precision, because if they're damned, they'll be damned for a reason. The regret doesn't weaken them. It drives them. Makes them more effective servants because they're not just following divine commands mindlessly. They're trying to make their damnation mean something, trying to justify the unjustifiable, trying to convince themselves that there was a point to all of this suffering. And in that desperation, they accomplish far more than the princes who simply accepted their fate without question. This is the true horror that most fail to grasp. The Chaos Gods don't destroy their servants' humanity as punishment. They preserve just enough of it to keep their servants eternally motivated, eternally striving, eternally suffering in ways that pure demons never could. A daemon who was never human can't regret losing humanity, but a Daemon Prince can. And that regret, that suffering, that endless internal torment feeds the dark gods just as surely as any act of violence or corruption their servants commit. It's possible that every Daemon Prince who regrets their ascension is exactly where their patron god wants them to be. That the suffering itself is the point. That they were never meant to enjoy their reward, only to chase it eternally, forever believing they're one more atrocity away from making their sacrifice worthwhile. One more conquest away from proving they made the right choice. One more act of service away from finding the peace they lost the moment they ascended. If this is true, then the question of whether they chose their fate becomes irrelevant. Because either way, whether they walked willingly into damnation or were pushed, whether they understood the price or were deceived about it, they end up in exactly the same place, trapped, suffering, serving, forever. And perhaps most disturbing of all, there's no way to confirm this theory without becoming one of them. No way to know if the regret is genuine or manufactured, organic or implanted, a flaw in the system or a feature working exactly as designed. The only beings who could answer that question with certainty are the Chaos Gods themselves, and they're not talking. They're too busy laughing at the cosmic joke they've played on their most devoted servants. But then, in the deepest archives of the Black Library, there exists a fragment, a recording, a testimony from something that should not exist. A Daemon Prince who found a way to speak clearly, coherently, without the madness that typically colors such communications. The recording is incomplete, damaged by time and the corrosive nature of warp energy that somehow bled into a physical medium. But what remains is enough to shake the foundations of everything the Imperium believes about Ascension, about damnation, about the permanence of the fall. The voice belongs to someone who calls themselves Arvenith, though they admit the name is borrowed, stolen from a poet whose work they admired in life. Their original name is gone, eroded by centuries of existence as something other than human. What makes this recording extraordinary is not what Arvenith says, but how they say it. There is no raving, no prophetic riddles or cryptic declarations, just exhaustion. The kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from fighting a war you know you cannot win, have never been able to win, will never be able to win. Arvenith speaks of the moment after Ascension, the clarity that sometimes comes in that first breath as a demon. They describe it as standing at the peak of a mountain, looking down at the path you climbed, and realizing with perfect, crystalline understanding that you were always climbing toward a cliff. That the peak was never meant to be reached. That the journey itself was the trap, and you walked into it with such confidence, such certainty, that you knew better than all those who had fallen before you. The recording captures something in their voice when they speak about this, something that might be laughter, if laughter could carry the weight of eternal sorrow. But then Arvenith says something that changes everything. They claim that in rare moments, when the veil between materium and immaterium grows thin, when the great rift tears reality in just the right way, a Daemon Prince can experience something unprecedented. They can feel the Emperor's light. Not as the burning, cleansing fire that destroys demons, but as a distant echo of what they once felt when they were human, when they believed in something greater than themselves. It lasts only seconds, perhaps less. But in those seconds, they remember why they fought for the Imperium in the first place. They remember the hope they once carried. And they understand with devastating clarity that it was real. That it wasn't propaganda or indoctrination or lies told by a tyrannical regime. That there was something worth protecting, and they abandoned it for power that can never fill the void its absence created. The recording degrades here, Arvaneth's voice distorting, as if something is trying to prevent them from continuing. But they push through, their words becoming more urgent, more desperate. They speak of a gathering that supposedly takes place in a forgotten corner of the warp, a place where the influence of the Chaos Gods is somehow muted, where demon princes from different allegiances come together, not to fight but to remember, to share their regrets in an environment where doing so won't immediately trigger punishment from their patrons. They call it the Gallery of Echoes, though whether this is a literal place or a metaphorical concept is unclear from the damaged recording. According to Arvaneth, the gallery exists in a location that should be impossible. A stillness within the warp, a pocket of almost calm in an ocean of perpetual storm. They describe it as a hall lined with mirrors, but the mirrors don't show reflections, they show memories. Each demon prince who enters sees themselves as they were, moments before they fell. Some see themselves in battle, making the choice that would damn them. Others see quieter moments, the slow erosion of principle, the gradual compromise, the 1,000 small steps that led to the final plunge. The mirrors are merciless in their honesty, showing not just what happened, but what could have happened if different choices had been made. The recording captures Arvaneth describing their own mirror. They see themselves in an interrogation chamber, facing a captured heretic who offered them forbidden knowledge in exchange for their life. In the real timeline, Arvaneth accepted. Listen to the heretic speak of the warp's truth, of the power available to those willing to reach for it. That conversation planted the seed that eventually grew into their damnation. But in the mirror, they watch themselves refuse. Watch themselves execute the heretic and file a report, returning to their duties, living an unremarkable life that ends centuries later in an unremarkable death, defending an unremarkable world. The mirror shows them dying in the arms of a battle brother, their last words a prayer to the Emperor, their last sight the aquila on their brother's armor. Arvaneth's voice breaks here. The recording captures what might be a sob, if demons could cry, if demon princes retained the physical capacity for tears. They speak of standing in front of that mirror for what felt like eons, watching their unlived life play out over and over, seeing every birthday they never celebrated, every friend they never made, every sunset they never witnessed because they chose power over peace. The mirror shows them grandeur too, the battles they would have fought, the honors they would have earned, the respect of their brothers, the satisfaction of duty fulfilled. But mostly it shows them the small things, a shared meal, a moment of laughter during training, the quiet pride of teaching a neophyte, the simple, unmeasurable value of being part of something larger than yourself, without trying to become something else entirely. Then Arvaneth reveals why they made this recording, why they risked everything to smuggle this testimony into the Black Library where it might be found. They claim the Gallery of Echoes is not natural. It was created, built, constructed by someone or something with the power to carve out a space beyond the reach of the Chaos Gods, even if only temporarily. The recording suggests multiple possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. Perhaps it was built by the Emperor himself, a final mercy for those who fell, a place where they could remember what they lost, even if they could never reclaim it. Perhaps it was created by Eldrad Ulthran or another Eldar Farseer, a study in the nature of chaos and corruption. Perhaps it was built by Tzeentch as the ultimate cruel joke, giving his servants exactly what they want, clarity and memory, only to snatch it away and return them to their eternal service. Or perhaps, and this is where Arvaneth's voice becomes barely audible, strained as if speaking the words causes physical pain, perhaps it was built by the Daemon Princes themselves, by the regretful ones who somehow found a way to pool their remaining will, their collective fragments of humanity, into creating one place where they could be something other than what they were made to be, even if only for a moment, even if that moment changes nothing about their fate. The recording ends abruptly, cut off mid-sentence, as Arvaneth seems to be describing how to find the gallery. Whether this is deliberate editing by whoever placed the recording in the Black Library, or whether something prevented Arvaneth from finishing, is impossible to determine. But the final words that do survive are perhaps the most haunting. Arvaneth says, their voice steading into something resembling acceptance, that the worst part of the gallery is not witnessing what you lost. It's returning to service afterward. Because once you've seen clearly, once you've remembered fully, once you've stood in front of that mirror and watched your better life play out, you can never unhear the screaming. The constant, eternal screaming of the person you were, trapped inside the demon you became, begging for release that will never come. And then silence. The inquisitors who discovered this recording debated for months about what to do with it. Some argued it should be destroyed, that it served no purpose except to provide false hope to those already fallen and disturb those still loyal. Others believed it should be studied, analyzed, that understanding the regret of Daemon Princes might provide insight into how to prevent others from falling. A few, the most radical and perhaps the most honest, suggested that it should be disseminated widely, that every Space Marine, every Imperial Guard officer, every servant of the Imperium should hear it and understand exactly what awaits those who choose damnation. In the end, they did nothing. The recording remains in the Black Library, cataloged and sealed, accessible only to those with the highest clearance and the strongest will. Because the truth it contains is dangerous not to the enemy, but to the Imperium itself. It suggests that the fallen are not mindless monsters beyond redemption or understanding, that they suffer in ways that make their continued service more horrifying, not less, that the punishment for heresy might be worse than any physical torture the Imperium could devise, which raises uncomfortable questions about the nature of justice, mercy, and whether eternal torment can ever be deserved, no matter the crime. But more than that, the recording proves something that the Imperium desperately wants to deny. That the fallen still think, still feel, still remember. That somewhere inside every Daemon Prince, no matter how corrupted, no matter how far they've traveled down the path of damnation, there might be a fragment of the person they were, screaming into a void that never answers, reaching for a light that grows dimmer with every passing century, but never quite extinguishes completely. And if that's true, then every battle against chaos becomes more complicated. Every corrupted warrior becomes not just an enemy to be destroyed, but a tragedy to be mourned. Every Daemon Prince becomes a cautionary tale and a victim simultaneously, perpetrator and prisoner, monster and martyr all at once. The question is no longer whether Daemon Princes regret their ascension. The recording proves that at least some do. The question is what that regret means, whether it changes anything, whether it should. And there, in that question, lies something that terrifies the Imperium more than any demon army, more than any chaos incursion, more than any threat from the warp. Complexity, nuance, the possibility that the universe is not divided into absolute good and irredeemable evil, but is instead painted in shades of gray that no doctrine can adequately address, no catechism can properly categorize, no amount of faith can simplify into comfortable certainty. Somewhere in the warp, at this very moment, a Daemon Prince named Karvoth stands before his mirror in the Gallery of Echoes. He has been standing there for 300 years by the reckoning of real space, though time means nothing in this pocket of stillness. The reflection shows him something he has tried to forget, shows him the moment before everything changed. He is human still, kneeling in the ruins of a chapel on a world whose name has been scoured from all records. His armor is cracked, his weapons broken, his brothers dead around him. And he is praying. Actually praying, not the mechanical recitation that service demands, but genuine faith, desperate and pure. The mirror shows him what he said, shows him begging the Emperor for strength to die well, to die with honor, to die knowing he served to the end. He asked for nothing else, expected nothing else, was prepared for nothing else. But then the whispers came. Khorne's voice, offering not just survival but vengeance, offering power to destroy those who had killed his brothers, offering the strength to make the enemy pay for every drop of blood spilled. And in his grief, in his rage, in his overwhelming need to make their deaths mean something, he listened. The mirror shows the exact moment, shows his lips forming the words of acceptance, shows the first tendril of warp energy entering his body, shows his face changing from anguish to something else, something hungry and terrible and irrevocable. 300 years Karvoth has watched this moment replay. 300 years he has stood frozen, unable to look away, unable to move forward, unable to return to service. He is trapped between what he was and what he became, suspended in the instant of his damnation, experiencing it over and over in perfect clarity. This is what the gallery does. This is its true purpose. It doesn't offer comfort. It offers truth. Unfiltered, uncompromising, absolute truth. And for beings who have spent centuries lying to themselves about their choices, about their reasons, about their justifications, truth is the cruelest gift imaginable. Other demon princes walk the gallery's halls. Minkar is here, has been here, watching himself orchestrate the corruption that damned his entire legion. Watching himself believe, truly believe, that he was saving humanity by destroying it. The mirror shows him the faces of every innocent he sacrificed for the greater good. Shows him their last moments, their fear, their confusion, their betrayal. Forces him to witness what his greater good actually purchased. Endless suffering, pointless death. A future no better than the one he tried to prevent, just wearing different chains. Periclitor stands before his mirror, all his eyes focused on a single point. He watches himself receiving the first vision from Tzeentch. Watches himself choose to investigate rather than report it. Watches the pride on his face, the certainty that he, uniquely among all navigators, could handle this forbidden knowledge without being corrupted by it. The mirror shows him every moment of his fall in sequence, every small compromise, every justified transgression. Every time he told himself he was different, he was stronger, he could resist what others could not. The mirror shows him the truth he denied. He was never special, never different, never strong enough. He was just another fool who thought himself immune to corruption. Another prideful soul who learned too late that pride itself was the corruption. The gallery fills with such scenes. Hundreds of them. Thousands perhaps. Each demon prince locked in their moment of choice, watching themselves choose wrong, watching themselves fall, unable to change it, unable to escape it, unable to do anything but witness and understand. This is their real torment. Not the service to the chaos gods, not the acts of horror they commit across the galaxy, not even the loss of their humanity. The real torment is understanding, knowing exactly where they went wrong, seeing the precise instant they could have chosen differently, watching their better selves die over and over while their demon selves live on forever. And standing in the center of the gallery, before a mirror larger than all the others, is a figure that should not exist here. A demon prince whose form shifts between all four chaos gods' marks, suggesting impossible allegiance to powers that should tear such a being apart. This prince does not look at their mirror. They look at the gallery itself, at all the other princes trapped in their memories, and when they speak, their voice carries to every corner of the impossible space. Do you understand now? The voice is neither male nor female, neither young nor old, neither kind nor cruel. It simply is. Do you see what you've become? Not what the gods made you. What you made yourselves. Every choice was yours. Every step down this path you took willingly. You reached for power when you could have reached for grace. You chose certainty over faith. You chose yourself over service. And now you stand here, drowning in regret, believing that understanding somehow absolves you. The figure moves through the gallery, passing each frozen prince. But it doesn't. Understanding changes nothing. Regret is not redemption. Suffering is not penance. You can witness your fall 1,000,000 times, can experience every moment of clarity the gallery offers, can see with perfect vision every choice you made wrong, And at the end of it all, you will still be what you are. Still serve who you serve. Still damn others the way you damned yourselves. The gallery trembles. Reality, such as it exists in this place, begins to fracture. The mirrors start to crack, their reflections fragmenting into countless shards, each showing a different moment, a different choice, a different path not taken. And the princes begin to move again, pulling themselves away from their frozen contemplation, turning to face this impossible figure who speaks such terrible truths. Who are you? Carvoth manages to ask, his voice rusty from 3 centuries of silence. What gives you the right to judge us? The figure laughs. It is not a cruel laugh. It is sad, infinitely sad. I am what you fear most. I am the possibility you cannot accept. I am a demon prince who found a way back. Silence, complete, absolute silence. Every prince in the gallery stops moving, stops breathing if they still breathe, stops existing in any meaningful way except as awareness focused entirely on these impossible words. Lies. This from Periclitor, his 1,000 eyes all focusing on the figure. There is no way back. The transformation is absolute. The soul is gone. We've searched. We've studied. We've begged. There is no undoing apotheosis. You're right, the figure agrees. There is no undoing it. The man you were is dead. Gone. Never coming back. But that doesn't mean you must be what the gods intended. They gave you power, yes. Bound you to their service, yes. Made you into weapons for their eternal war, yes. But they made one mistake. They left you able to choose. Constrained choice, limited choice. Choice that costs more than any being should have to pay. But choice nonetheless. The figure's form solidifies slightly, becoming more defined. Features begin to emerge. Human features. A face that might have once been handsome or might have once been plain, impossible to tell through the corruption that still marks it. I serve no god now. I serve nothing but the memory of what I was and the hope of preventing others from becoming what I am. I cannot die, cannot return to humanity, cannot undo my damnation. But I can choose how I use what I've become. I can choose to fight against the tide instead of with it. I can choose to save where once I destroyed, to protect where once I corrupted, to remember where once I forgot. The pain, Mekar says quietly. The gods punish such choices. The agony of defying your nature, of resisting the drives that define your existence. How do you endure it? I don't. The figure's honesty is brutal. Every moment is torture. Every second I spend resisting chaos's call is worse than anything the Imperium's interrogators could devise. My existence is suffering beyond measure, but it is chosen suffering. Mine, not theirs. That makes all the difference. The gallery begins to collapse. The mirrors shatter completely, their fragments scattering like stars across impossible space. The princes feel themselves being pulled back, drawn toward the materium, toward their duties, toward their service. The moment of clarity is ending. The respite is over. They will return to being what they are, doing what they do, serving who they serve. But as they fade, as the gallery dissolves around them, the figure's final words follow them back into damnation. You cannot change what you are, but you can choose what you do with it. That choice, that tiny sliver of will the gods left you, that is the only humanity you have left. Use it or lose it. Regret or resist. The gallery will always be here, showing you what you lost. But I will be out there, proving that loss is not the end of the story. The princes return to their domains, return to their wars, return to their service. But something has changed. Not in what they are, that remains fixed, immutable, eternal, but in what they know, in what they've seen, in what they might, possibly, against all odds and all logic and all divine will, choose to do about it. Carvoth materializes on a demon world, surrounded by Khorne's legions awaiting his command. They expect him to lead them in slaughter, in conquest, in the eternal pursuit of skulls for the skull throne. And he will, because he must. Because his nature demands it. But as he raises his blade and opens his mouth to roar his battle cry, he makes a choice. A small one, insignificant in the grand scheme of cosmic horror. He orders his forces to bypass a refugee convoy fleeing the system. No reason given. No explanation offered. Just a command that makes no tactical sense, serves no strategic purpose, accomplishes nothing except saving lives that mean nothing to Khorne. His legion obeys, confused but obedient. And somewhere deep in whatever remains of Karvoth's soul, something that died 3 centuries ago stirs. Just a flutter, just a whisper, just the faintest suggestion that perhaps, maybe, impossibly, the man is not entirely gone. That the demon wears his corpse, but the corpse still dreams. Is it enough? No. It changes nothing about what he is, what he'll do, what he'll continue to be until reality itself ends. But it is something. And in the grim darkness of the far future, where hope is heresy and mercy is weakness, sometimes something is all that remains. The Imperium will never know what happened in the Gallery of Echoes. The Inquisition will never discover the choice that rippled through dozens, perhaps hundreds of demon princes across the galaxy. The histories being written in the scriptoriums of Terra will never record the day that damnation learned to question itself. And perhaps that's fitting. Perhaps some truths are too dangerous to be known, too complex to be reduced to doctrine, too nuanced to survive the translation from experience into record. But the effects are there, subtle, almost invisible, easy to dismiss as coincidence or tactical error, or the incomprehensible whims of chaos. Demon army that inexplicably withdraws from a hospital ship, leaving it intact when annihilation would have been effortless. A plague that spreads through a hive city but somehow skips the orphanages, defying all logic of contagion and infection. A ritual of corruption interrupted at its climax by the very Daemon Prince who was meant to complete it, who instead tears apart his own summoning circle and vanishes back into the warp without explanation. Small things. Meaningless things in the scale of galactic war. Lives saved that will never know they were in danger. Futures preserved that will never know they were almost erased. Are these acts of defiance or mere random fluctuations in the patterns of chaos? The Imperium doesn't ask because it doesn't see them as connected. Each incident is isolated, investigated if it's noticed at all, then filed away as another mystery in a universe drowning in mysteries. But there are a very few, who have begun to notice the pattern. Inquisitors who have spent lifetimes studying chaos, who have learned to read the warp's tides like sailors read the ocean. They see something changing, not in chaos itself, which remains as eternal and terrible as ever, but in its servants. In the way some demon princes fight now, with less enthusiasm, with more hesitation, as if they're going through motions they no longer fully believe in, serving purposes they no longer fully accept. One such inquisitor, an ancient woman named Covenant who has witnessed horrors that would break lesser minds, sits in her chambers aboard a black ship and studies reports that officially don't exist. Sightings of demon princes who fought against other chaos forces. Testimonies from survivors who swear they were spared by beings that should have killed them. Fragments of intercepted demonic communication that speak of something called resistance, of princes who have gone rogue not by switching allegiances, but by refusing to serve at all. The evidence is thin, circumstantial, could be explained away by 1,000 other factors. But Covenant has learned to trust her instincts, and her instincts tell her something unprecedented is happening in the warp. She will never prove it, will never be able to present her findings to the Ordo Malleus and have them taken seriously. The very idea is heretical. Demon princes choosing mercy? Chaos entities acting against their nature? It contradicts everything the Imperium knows, everything it teaches, everything it believes about the immutability of corruption. To accept that the fallen might resist their damnation is to accept that damnation itself is more complicated than doctrine allows. And the Imperium cannot afford complications. It needs absolute enemies to justify absolute measures. It needs irredeemable evil to contrast against its own righteousness. The possibility that some who fell might still struggle against their chains, might still retain enough humanity to make choices that serve the light even while trapped in darkness. That possibility threatens the foundation of 10,000 years of dogma. So Covenant keeps her suspicions to herself, continues her investigations quietly, watches the patterns evolve. And sometimes, in her private moments, she wonders about the Daemon Prince who supposedly started all this. The one who found a way back, not to humanity but to choice. She wonders if they're real, or if they're a myth the regretful princes tell themselves, a story they need to believe in to endure their existence. She wonders if it matters whether they're real. Because real or not, the idea of them is enough. The possibility of resistance, even doomed resistance, even resistance that changes nothing about the ultimate outcome, gives meaning to suffering that would otherwise be purely nihilistic. That might be the most important revelation of all. That meaning doesn't require victory. That choosing to resist, to fight against your nature, to hold on to fragments of who you were, even when transformation seems absolute, that choice itself has value regardless of whether it accomplishes anything measurable. The Daemon Princes who regret their ascension, who stand in the gallery and witness their fall, who return to service but carry that witnessing with them, they prove something the Chaos Gods never intended to prove. That consciousness cannot be completely subsumed. That awareness, once achieved, cannot be fully erased. That even in the deepest damnation, even in transformation so complete that your body, mind, and soul have been rewritten to serve purposes you despise, some core of self persists. Screaming perhaps, trapped certainly, but present, always present. Is that a comfort or a curse? For the Daemon Princes themselves, it's both. The awareness that makes their regret possible is the same awareness that makes their suffering eternal. If they could forget completely, become pure demons without memory or conscience, their existence would be simpler if not happier. But they can't forget, won't forget. The gallery ensures that. The mirrors show them truth they cannot unsee, burden them with understanding they cannot unlearn. And perhaps that's the real purpose of the gallery, regardless of who built it. Not to offer redemption, which is impossible. Not to provide escape, which doesn't exist, but to make sure they remember. To ensure that somewhere in the vast machinery of chaos, there are voices that still question, minds that still doubt, wills that still resist even when resistance is futile. Futile resistance might seem pointless. What does it accomplish to save one refugee convoy when you'll lead armies that kill billions? What meaning does one interrupted ritual have when 1,000 others succeed? What difference does it make to choose mercy once when your nature compels you to choose cruelty 1,000,000 times? But these questions miss something fundamental about choice and meaning. Value doesn't always scale. Sometimes the smallest acts carry the greatest significance precisely because they're the hardest to justify, the most difficult to explain, the least rational to perform. When Carvel spared that convoy, he gained nothing, risked everything. Acted against his nature, his orders, his very existence as a Daemon Prince of Khorne. The act made no strategic sense. Served no greater plan. Accomplished nothing except saving lives that would statistically mean nothing in the grand calculation of war. But to the people in that convoy, to the children who will grow up because they survived, to the futures that will unfold because those lives continued, the choice meant everything. And perhaps to Carvoth himself, it meant something too. A proof, however small, that he still could choose. That damnation had not completely destroyed his will. That the man who prayed in that ruined chapel, who asked only to die well, still existed somewhere inside the demon that wears his form. Not enough of him to matter in any cosmic sense. Not enough to change his fate or alter his service or undo any of the horror he's committed and will continue to commit. But enough to make one choice, in one moment, that honored what he used to be. Is that redemption? No. Redemption requires transformation. requires becoming something other than what you are, and demon princes cannot transform back. The process is irreversible. The soul is gone. The man is dead. These are facts that no amount of regret or resistance can change. But redemption and resistance are not the same thing. Redemption is about achieving salvation. Resistance is about refusing to surrender completely. You can resist without being redeemed, can fight without winning, can choose meaning in the face of meaninglessness, can retain humanity's essential characteristic, the ability to choose against your nature, even when your nature has been rewritten by gods. Perhaps that's the answer to the question posed at the beginning. Is immortality truly a gift when it strips away everything that made you human? The answer is no, but the question itself was incomplete. Because immortality doesn't strip away everything. It can't. The very capacity for regret, for suffering, for questioning your existence, proves that something human remains. Distorted, tortured, buried beneath layers of demonic corruption, but present. And as long as it's present, as long as that spark of awareness persists, the fallen are not completely lost. Not saved, not redeemed, not forgivable for what they've done and will do, but not completely lost either. They exist in the space the Imperium's doctrine cannot accommodate, simultaneously damned and struggling against damnation, corrupted and yet aware of their corruption. Servants of chaos who sometimes, in small ways that cost them everything, serve something else. They are walking contradictions, living proof that the universe is more complicated than simple binaries of good and evil, loyal and traitor, human and demon. They are the gray space between absolutes, and that gray space terrifies both the Imperium and the Chaos Gods precisely because it suggests that neither side has complete power over the souls they claim. Somewhere in the warp, the Gallery of Echoes waits. Its mirrors stand ready to show truth to any demon prince who finds their way there, who can endure the sight of what they were and what they became. The figure who claims to have found a way back, real or imagined, continues their work. The regretful princes carry their burdens across eternity, fighting wars they no longer believe in, serving gods they've learned to question, existing in a hell made worse by their awareness that it is hell. And sometimes, just sometimes, they make a choice that echoes with everything they've lost. A choice that changes nothing about the grand sweep of galactic war, but changes everything about who they are in that moment. These are the demon princes who regret their ascension. Not heroes, not villains simple enough to categorize. Just beings who reached for something they thought they wanted and found themselves holding something they never imagined. Beings who learned too late that some prices are too high to pay, some transformations too complete to reverse, some choices too final to undo. Beings who now carry that knowledge forward into eternity, unable to die, unable to change, unable to do anything except continue existing, and occasionally, impossibly, defiantly, choose to be something more than what their damnation demands. And perhaps, in the end, that tiny act of defiance, repeated across countless damned souls in countless small moments throughout the eternal war, perhaps that matters more than any doctrine or dogma can measure. Perhaps the regretful princes, by refusing to fully surrender even when surrender would be easier, by maintaining their capacity to question and choose and suffer, prove something profound about consciousness itself, that it cannot be fully controlled, cannot be completely rewritten, cannot be made to forget what it knows or accept what it rejects, that somewhere in every mind, no matter how corrupted, exists the possibility of resistance. And possibility, however slim, is what separates existence from mere mechanical function, is what makes suffering meaningful rather than merely painful, is what transforms regret from weakness into the last desperate form of strength available to those who have lost everything else. The question is not whether they regret their ascension. They do. The question is what they do with that regret. And the answer, written in acts too small for history to record, but too significant for eternity to ignore, is that they resist. They choose, they remember. And in remembering, they remain, against all odds and all intentions of gods and men alike, human in the only way that truly matters, not in form, not in allegiance, but in the eternal, inextinguishable capacity to look at what you've become and wish, however futilely, that you had chosen differently.